Music doesn't affect change, it only reflects it. But I'm here to tell you otherwise. What some say was a myth was a very real part of making me the man I am today. My Jamaican heritage meant reggae had been ever present, but it was the arrival of punk rock that opened a door to a world of new possibilities. This is the story of my passion for music. This is the story of Dread Meets Punk Rockers. No, this ain't Kingston, Jamaica. This is London in the late 70s. Brixton, to be precise. Yes, the sun was shining, but the people were feeling the pressure all the same, black and white. The social climate was shit with mass unemployment, political turmoil, the rise of the National Front, and, to top it off, constant grief from the police. But at least we had a soundtrack to ease our pain. Well, that's what it did for my parents, who'd come over as part of the Windrush generation to help rebuild the country after the Second World War. By this time, the upbeat sounds of ska they arrived with had evolved into something far more militant, far more politicised, reflecting a change in the mood of the island and the world in general. This new version of Jamaican music came with a heavy philosophy and dealt with themes and topics that translated perfectly to the streets of London. I'm what you call first-generation British-born black, which back then was a very confusing concept, trust me. So as youth, we looked to America for guidance, but we weren't American, so we looked to Jamaica. The arrival of reggae and sound system culture was to become an all-consuming passion for youth like myself, desperately trying to work out where we fit in. It was in this climate that we discovered Rastafari, through a new wave of emerging Jamaican artists who captured the eyes and ears of a young Don. I clearly remember the first time I saw Big Youth at the Hammersmith Palais. His conscious lyrics combined with a heavyweight sound were a long way from the clean-cut soul we were all grooving to a few years previously. A million miles from the glamour of the soul scene, it seemed far more relevant to our daily lives. It was raw, very real, and it was definitely coming from the streets. Most importantly, it was empowering a generation that desperately needed it. This was rebel music with big bass lines and serious lyrical content. The previously lost tribes of the UK now had a direction. The new wave of Jamaican artists struck a chord with black youth growing up over here, with a message that rippled out into the streets. And nowhere was that more self-evident than at the Notting Hill Carnival. Now, when Carnival started, it kind of reminded my parents of back home, a place they might return to. But for my generation, it meant something else, and we weren't going nowhere. By 1976, the carnival had been hijacked by the Jamaican sound systems, and they would prove to be an integral part of spreading the word, sound, and power of this new source of information and inspiration. This was our time, and we were sure going to make the most of it. Finally, we had a look, an attitude, and a soundtrack that came with Jamaica's gift to the world, bass. And yes, my friends, against all the trouble and strife, these were good times. Girls were grooving, ganja was burning, and for 2 days of the year, these streets were ours. Roots reggae, sound system, dreadlocks, and the red, gold and green of Rastafari were the order of the day. A show of black pride in the face of prejudice. And yet there was a white presence, and I'm not talking about the police. Ironically, by the mid-70s, it seems as if society had managed to alienate its own white youth, and many of these like-minded rebels were also in attendance. Now, police pressure over the previous year led to some serious discontent on the street, and tension in the community was palpable. Consequently, police pressure at the 1976 Carnival was at an all-time high, and this was the year the brothers said no more. It kicked off after police tried to arrest a pickpocket close to Portobello Road. Several black youth stepped in to help, and it escalated into a riot. Police grabbed dustbin lids to protect themselves from the bricks and bottles raining down on them. And yet to this very day, people still think there was a racial theme to the 76 riots. But it wasn't a black and white thing, it was a wrong and right thing. I know, because I was there. Politics coming from the streets of London and the music coming from the streets of Kingston, Jamaica, would provide the basic ammunition for a young rising poet based in Brixton.
Madness, madness tight on the heads of the rebels. The bitterness erupts like a hot blast. Broke glass, rituals of blood on the burning, served by a cruel fighting. 5 nights of horror on the bleeding. Broke glass, cold blades as sharp as the highs of hate and the stabbings. It's war amongst the rebels. Madness, madness, war.
By 1976, I was managing a shop called Acme Attractions on the Kings Road, Chelsea, with Jeanette Lee, selling retro clothes and pumping reggae all day long. And it was here that I started to see these alienated white youth with a very different look, moving between our place and the shop Sex, run by Vivienne Westwood and Malcolm McLaren down the road. Something was obviously in the air. Something was obviously about to happen. It was Jeanette that got me to see the clash. I was initially suspicious of these guys that had grabbed my girlfriend's attention, but when I first saw them live, they were like 4 sticks of dynamite. I realized these pissed off kids were in the process of creating their own soundtrack. Hey, every generation needs one. Of the people, for the people, by the people. Although I couldn't understand a word Joe was singing, the energy of the band was undeniable. You couldn't just stand and stare. You wanted to get involved. You wanted to be a part of what was unfolding before your very eyes. Inspired by the troubles at Carnival and taking some tips from the brothers, the Clash's White Riot was a call to arms. I already had my rebel music, and now it looked like my white mates had theirs as well. And in the not too distant future, these very two different tribes would meet. Uptown. rest of the country was being entertained by the Queen's Silver Jubilee, for most of us it meant fuck all. Against a backdrop of royal celebrations, the Sex Pistols had lit the fuse to a movement that would change the musical landscape forever. When John sang No Future, it wasn't an admission of defeat, it was a war cry that told people to get off their asses and get involved. It's said that whenever the Pistols played, hundreds of bands would start the next day, which was true. It's also true that many kids walked away from those gigs inspired by the punk DIY ethic, and it informed whatever they did. There was a lot of reinvention going on in those days. All of a sudden, there were punk photographers, writers, graphic artists, fashion designers, and yes, filmmakers. My landscape had also changed, as I now lived in Forest Hill, South London, with my Rasta brethren, JR, Leo Williams, and Tony, known simply as T. Because of my job at Acme Attractions, they were getting daily updates on what was going on uptown. My next update came as a bit of a shock. Andrew Chakowski, Acme Attractions accountant, decided to open a club in Covent Garden. And because of the reaction I got to the music I played in the shop, he asked me to DJ there. The Roxy officially opened January the 1st, 1977, as the UK's first live punk rock venue, providing the third essential ingredient of any good movement: the people, the soundtrack, and an HQ. The club was a place these like-minded people could meet, and for a short while, it was the centre of the punk rock universe. I got a feeling inside of me. It's kind of strange. Andrew needed staff to run the joint, so I asked my Rasta brethren if they were interested, and they responded with howls of laughter. But when they came down, they saw two things: the girls and an untapped herb market. To mess around, I got a brand new rose in town. I don't know why, I don't know why. Punks couldn't roll their own spliffs, so my brother Desmond decided to sell ready-rolled ones behind the bar. I remember Shane McGowan once asking for 2 beers and 1 spliff. But after a moment's hesitation, he said no, make that 2 spliffs and 1 beer. Yes, there was some serious cultural exchange going on at the Roxy.
Is it finished? Yeah! Oh, some decent fucking music at last!
This was so early in the day, there were no punk records to play. So I played what I liked, dub reggae. And lucky for me, the punks liked it too. They liked the bass lines, the musical reportage quality of the lyrics, and they obviously didn't mind the weed either. And while the dreads were downstairs selling weed, some punks were upstairs jacking speed. And in this most unlikely of situations, bonds were formed. We became closer by understanding our differences. The UK punk explosion attracted some American acts to the Roxy. Ex-New York Doll Johnny Thunder's Heartbreakers being the best, and they brought a kick-ass guitar sound to the mix. Unfortunately, they also brought Nancy Spungen and Smack. I'm living on a Chinese rock. All my best things are red hot. I'm living on a Chinese rock.
Do you know this Jersey shit? There's a white rock they first out of the country, but they said these geezers, right, all the fucking criminals in Jersey, right, they'll go, fuck you, mate, cunt. Did you find some guy's face? Did? Wow, how'd that come about? A pig, he was fucking looking at my arse to see if I had drugs up there. They said we didn't look like pop stars. I think I've never been trend pop stars.
A surprising amount of acts got their start at the Roxy. The Jam was just one of them. But it wasn't all good. Sometimes the place looked like something from One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Under the punk umbrella, a weird and wonderful assortment of characters took to the stage. Punk's all-inclusive, anyone-can-have-a-go mentality was being pushed to the max. The Roxy would prove to be fertile ground for this explosion of creativity, and many a good laugh. Shop tactics, weird clothes and DIY props, it was all up for grabs, with a good dash of fuck you, of course. Suddenly, it seemed that everyone had their own interpretation of what punk was, and in a bizarre way, I guess they all had a part to play. But the legendary Roxy was not to last. In fact, it was all over in 100 days when the landlord staged a coup.
The people who are down here, they know this is the last night. Because as far as they're concerned, this club is finished. Because it's Andy's last night.
Susie and the Banshees played the closing night of the club, but the punk DIY ethos had already opened a door. When the punks were picking up guitars, I picked up something too. My weapon of choice, a Super 8mm movie camera. And that's how my reinvention as a filmmaker began in earnest. The energy around the punk scene was contagious, and me and the brothers weren't going to get left behind. The Roxy might have ended, but this was only the beginning of Dread Meets Punk Rockers. While some punk bands were beginning to play more established venues and sign record deals, the Slits were just starting. And in a strange way, I'd end up being closer to them than any of the others. Consequently, the Dread burnt a lot of film on those girls. I was so captivated by their unpredictability and their anything can happen, and usually did live sets, I even tried to manage them at one point. Tried being the operative word. The Slits were the Slits 24/7. It wasn't an act. What you saw on stage is what you got off stage. Fierce doesn't come close, and they terrified men. Along with Susie, Sue and Polystyrene, these girls were crucial to the empowerment of women up and down the country. Thanks to the Slits, as punk spread across the land, I ended up on the Clash's White Riot tour with the girls and Buzzcocks. Buzzcocks were an outfit from Manchester, and they brought a pop sensibility to a form that for the most part was pretty pissed off and sounded as much. They delivered energetic punk songs that weren't afraid to deal with topics like love and emotion, which weren't really on the cards when the whole thing started. The bands on the Clash White Riot tour were a punk rock lineup made in heaven, and it was a total trip trying to keep up with them. Never mind document it on film. On reflection, maybe I should have read the manual that came with the camera, but hey, you live and you learn, and that's what punk's about. During 1977, my trusty Super 8 movie camera never left my side. With bands like The Clash, it's not hard to see why. They looked good, sounded great, and oozed attitude. You know, someone once said the Pistols would make you want to smash your head against the wall. But The Clash, well, they'd give you a reason. They saw music as a tool for personal and social change. They also understood it was all for nothing if you looked like shit and you didn't have a groove. Back in those days, music for your mind and your feet were very much connected, and The Clash were masters of the form. They totally understood the part and possibilities music played in people's lives. I had my own soundtrack, and now finally my white mates had theirs as well. And against all the odds, the pogoing, the gobbing, and all the rest, reggae would surprisingly remain in the mix. And why not? After all, it was Jamaica's punk rock. Culture's 2/7's Clash was a punk favourite I often played down at the Roxy, and its lyrics seemed to strike a chord, even though it was actually inspired by a prediction from Jamaican national hero Marcus Garvey, who said there would be chaos when the 2/7s met, being the 7th of July 1977. It was the musical reportage aspect of reggae, along with those heavy bass lines, that seemed to captivate my punk mates. Tunes like Chant Down Babylon, Police and Thieves, and 2/7's Clash seemed to reflect what was happening right here in the UK.
I take a ride sometimes, on over London tracks, and sometimes I ride up past 682, oh yeah, go there.
Because of this multicultural melting pot, a new school of thought was now introduced into the mix that would go way beyond musical genres. As for Garvey's prediction, well, the 7th of the 7th, 1977, passed without incident in Jamaica. But on an island far away, a culture clash of creative chaos was in progress.
We're the forces of victory and we're coming right through. We're the forces of victory now. What you gonna do? We make a little date in 1978 and we fight and defeat the state. Then all of we just forward up to nothing nil gate. Then all of we just forward up to nothing nil gate. We're the forces of victory and we're coming right through. We're the forces of victory now. What you gonna do?
On many nights after I'd finished DJing at the Roxy, a lot of principal punks would end up back at my place in Forest Hill listening to dub. The likes of The Clash, Generation X and others would be sowing the seeds for the future without even realising it. Late night dub sessions between Rastas and punks sounds bizarre, but that was the reality of the punky reggae party. And because of our mutual open-mindedness, new hybrids would spring up, signposting the multicultural way things were heading. The Clash would emerge as one of the best examples of the punky reggae party. And let's get it straight, I'm not talking about imitation. It's about taking inspiration and then doing your own thing your own way. The band actually went to Jamaica in 1977, referenced artists like Prince Farai and Dr. Alimantado, worked with Lee Scratch Perry, and the legendary DJ producer Mikey Dread. You know, it was really empowering to see my culture having such a profound impact on my white mates. I no longer felt like a poor relation, because I had something to bring to the party. As the Dread with the movie camera, I found myself in more and more interesting situations, like the time I was in the studio with Militant Barry and the late great producer and artist Keith Hudson.
There is no place that I'd rather be. There is no place that I'd rather be.
Keith Hudson's Pick It Up album was one of the first of its kind and was always on the turntable down at the Roxy. Then there was the time I found myself up a tree trying to film Bob Marley at the Crystal Palace Bowl, without, as you can see, much success. He was staying around the corner from Acme Attractions, and I used to sort him out. One day, I went round to collect some money he owed me wearing bondage gear. On seeing this, Bob started to take the piss, but I stood my ground, defending punk and my white mates as like-minded rebels. A few months later, a better informed Bob was moved to write the tune, Punky Reggae Party. Now, the Dread with a movie camera had his own personal soundtrack. The Slits were still putting their unique spin on things, but it was their love of Jamaican music and its culture that would really set them apart. Tessa, the bass player, for obvious reasons, loved reggae. Viv dug the style and the wordplay. And Ari, well, Ari pretty much turned Jamaican and would end up moving to the island. Needless to say, Jamaica was never the same again. And what did reggae get out of the deal? Well, it got exposure. And that's all it needed. The brothers could do the rest, with style, swagger, and a big bass line. Just as punk was gaining new ground, so were artists like Big Youth, who are now playing sell-out shows to mixed audiences in much larger venues. This was all against a backdrop of tough times and, it has to be said, not too comfortable racial climate. It was a soundtrack for personal change and, it would seem, social change. Don't get it twisted, not everyone was on the punky reggae train. Indeed, there were some that hated it, and then there were those that were oblivious, out there doing their own thing, their own particular way. Although with me in the mix, they had no choice. Whilst on tour with the likes of the Banshees and the Heartbreakers, I'd still be doing my bit on the turntables, in between getting the shot. Johnny Thunders and the Heartbreakers live was always a buzz because although they were often impaired by substance abuse, when they hit the stage, they rocked, and to my mind, remain one of the unsung heroes of the movement.
Someone's in the forest seeking hot to go.
I can't lie, having Susie Sue on the end of your lens was never a bad thing. And I was fortunate enough to see her and many others evolve in a very short space of time. And yours truly had a front row seat. I came to realise we were effectively touring around the UK with what was an extension of the Roxy. Fast and furious live punk sets, juxtaposed with dub reggae interludes.
Rastafari, live it and read it in the art of man, continually. See, you know what me have in my bag, yeah? Colombia gold.
The late, great Prince Far I. I love this brother, and so did the punks. I think it had something to do with the fact that he sounded like he gargled with gasoline.
See, right.
Far I was your classical Jamaican DJ and a master of the three vital ingredients: tone, content and delivery.
When I see this, it reminds me that you're going on. When I see the dudes, it reminds me that the fight in the two-part, you're the new Testament.
Funnily enough, as heavy and as intimidating as Prince Far I sounded, in reality, he was like a big Jamaican teddy bear.
Sent from Jerusalem School Road.
Seeing white guys pogoing to reggae was a bit weird, but my culture was certainly making a mark. And it's not hard to hear why Prince Far I was a Joe Strummer favourite. The Clash would continue to play homage to Jamaican music while still making it their own, with tunes like White Man in Hammersmith Palais being a classic example. And who do you think it was that took Strummer to the Palais that night? As Joe correctly observes in the song, the scene was rapidly changing, and so were they. But this was met by resistance from those who had very fixed ideas of punk. The thing about labels is, if you've got one, sometimes it's hard to be something else. As 1977 progressed, some didn't. What I called the tabloid punk emerged. Created by the media, they were the ones that would come to associate with all the cliches. But it was never just about fuck you, fast guitars, mohawks, gobbing and safety pins. It was about an attitude and a spirit. I mean, fuck you's okay for a start, but then what? The principal players of the punky reggae party realised this and were looking to move on. It's February 1978. The Pistols have imploded and John was looking to escape the ensuing media madness. Because of punk's interest in reggae, Virgin's Richard Branson decided to start a label called Frontline, in the same vein as Chris Blackwell's Island Records, and took John to Jamaica due to his reggae expertise. Because I was John's mate and Jamaican, well, sort of, John asked me to go with him. Now, the closest I'd ever been to Jamaica was watching The Harder They Come at my local cinema in Brixton. But through that film and reggae music, I was pretty well prepared. Other than the beads of sweat, my accent, and the fact that I couldn't walk on the scorching ground with my bare feet. Driving through Kingston felt like something from a spaghetti western. I remember us both sitting in silence as we stared through the window, taking it all in. Yes, here I was in Jamaica for the very first time, staying in the Sheraton Hotel, as featured in The Harder They Come, courtesy of Punk Rock and Richard Branson, who'd booked the whole floor. Punk had made no impact on the island, other than the odd headline about a strange English phenomenon. They knew John as the white man who sell not called discounting. They also knew he was public enemy #1 in the UK, and Jamaicans love a bad man. Across the whole island, it was like someone had beaten the jungle drums. Come and get some of the white man money. Over the next few weeks, there was an exodus of musicians to the hotel, trying to strike a deal with Richard and impress John. Here we were, surrounded by legendary names we'd previously only seen on record labels. I'm talking a reggae hall of fame. One day, we decided to leave the Sheraton and get a feel of the real Jamaica, which happened the minute we stepped out of the hotel. It was interesting to see artists like the Congos getting the same grief we encountered on the streets of London. It seems it wasn't just music that we had in common. After that little shakedown, the Congos took us to a secret pool in a hidden cave, only known to the local Rastas, that was said to have mystical powers. We took them at their word.
Calling the meek and the humble, welcome to Blackboard Jungle. So don't you...
One of our favourite hangouts was U-Roy's Yard. Now you'd think these artists that were playing to sell out crowds in the UK would be living large in Jamaica, but nothing could be further from the truth. And that wasn't the only eye-opener. At 7 in the morning, these dreads would be having a reggae breakfast, the Jamaican equivalent of coffee and cigarettes. I can tell you, it's a hell of a way to start the day. It dawned on me and John that with such a heavy breakfast, we probably should give U-Roy's offer of a Rasta lunch a miss. So we called another punk favourite, Tapazuki. Later that day, Tapper took us to Rima, the heaviest part of Kingston, a no-go area for police or anyone else with sense. And John asked, where's all these guns we keep hearing about? All of a sudden, someone whips out a massive fucking weapon, closely followed by everyone else. And now, there's guns all over the place, and me and John are shitting ourselves. 3 days later, one of the guys that had drawn his piece was dead. That trip, my first to Jamaica, was without doubt the most memorable journey of my life. Reggae had brought me and the punks together, and now punk had brought me closer to the legendary reggae artists I'd grown up listening to and being inspired by. I mean, this was beyond 3D, although that might have been the herb. Now for John, it must have been strange. After all, the Pistols had only broken up a few weeks before. Looking back on it, I was so over the moon to be there, I never really took time out to consider John's feelings. Whilst I was like a child in a musical sweet shop, John was thinking ahead. It was only when we returned to the UK and he began his new project with a clear vision did I realise what all those thoughtful moments in Jamaica were all about. when John returned with Public Image, he fused dub and rock into a warped, paranoid and claustrophobic sound that took tips from the sonic experiments created in Jamaica by the likes of King Tubby and Lee Scratch Perry, along with his love of more avant-garde stuff. John wasn't the only one that had tired of punk. By now, the Slits are bringing African rhythms into the mix. Once again, they'd emerge as one of the premier examples of the post-punk movement, which to my mind was far more musically interesting. The thing about the Slits was, they knew the punky reggae party wasn't so much about those two genres particularly, so much as an open-minded approach to the creative process and new influences. As powerful women doing their own thing their own way, they were leaders of the pack, inspiring countless others. The pop group from Bristol was something else. They mixed dub, reggae, punk, funk and avant-garde jazz with some seriously politicised lyrics and a live stage performance that was second to none. The post-punk bands that emerged at the end of the late 70s were actually far more liberating than what punk had become, a shambles of safety pins and bin liners, and all within about 18 months. But the doors that period opened would stay open forever, or so it seemed. The punky reggae party signposted a new postmodernist approach to making music, the legacy of which is still self-evident today. Before that, if you were doing rock, you did rock. If you were doing reggae, you did reggae. Music took me from the streets of Brixton to the streets of Kingston via punk rock, and onto a world in which I was not defined by my colour, a world in which anything was possible. You know, a long time ago, someone told me music doesn't affect change, it only reflects it. But my cultural journey has shown me otherwise, and the lessons I've learned along the way leave me in no doubt. I still have a passion for music, and I still believe it can affect change. It sure changed me.
Beautiful.